The mining outpost on Kelvar 7 was supposed to be a solitary assignment. Rhett had signed up for it precisely because of that 6 months of cataloging mineral deposits, far from the politics and noise of the core worlds. The planet's rust-colored plains stretched endlessly beneath twin suns, and the only sounds were the hum of his surveying equipment and the whistle of wind through crystalline rock formations. He'd been there 3 weeks when he first noticed the tracks. They were small, 4-toed impressions in the silicate dust near his HAB unit. Rhett crouched to examine them, his scanner confirming what his gut already knew. Predator class. Juvenile. Approximately 6 kilograms. The planet's indigenous fauna were supposed to be confined to the polar regions, yet here was evidence of something much closer. Rhett didn't report it. The colonial administration would either evacuate him, ending his contract early, or send a extermination team. Neither option sat well with him. He simply started keeping his plasma pistol closer and his eyes sharper. The cub appeared 2 days later. Rhett was kneeling beside an ore extractor, rewiring a faulty power coupling, when something latched onto his boot. He jerked his leg instinctively, and a small creature tumbled backward into the dust with an indignant chirp. It was no larger than a terrier, covered in sleek midnight fur that rippled with iridescent blues and purples in the sunlight. 6 eyes, 3 on each side of its wedge-shaped head, blinked at him in rapid succession. Needle-sharp teeth were bared in what could have been a threat or a grin. "Easy there," Rhett muttered, slowly reaching for his sidearm. The cub cocked its head. Then it pounced on his boot again, tiny claws scrabbling against the reinforced leather. It growled, a sound like gravel in a blender, and worried at the laces. Rhett's hand paused on his weapon. The attack, if it could be called that, was utterly non-threatening. Playful, even. He'd seen puppies with more killer instinct. "You're supposed to be terrifying," he said, slowly lowering his hand. The cub released his boot and sat back on its haunches, all 6 eyes fixed on him with unsettling intensity. Its tail long, muscular, and tipped with bony protrusions lashed behind it. Rhett turned back to his work. The cub watched for approximately 30 seconds before launching itself at his boot again. This pattern continued for the better part of an hour. Rhett would work, the cub would attack his boots, he would shake it off, and it would regroup for another assault. There was something almost endearing about its persistence, though Rhett knew better than to anthropomorphize an apex predator, even a small one. When the cub finally wore itself out, it curled up in the shadow of the extractor and watched him with unblinking eyes. Rhett finished his repairs, packed his tools, and headed back to the HAB unit. The cub followed at a distance, darting between rocks and equipment like a furry shadow. "You can't come inside," Rhett told it at the airlock. The cub sat and tilted its head, 6 eyes reflecting the setting suns. Rhett sighed and went inside alone. Through the viewport, he watched the cub settle near the entrance, curling into a tight ball. Something in his chest tightened uncomfortably. He told himself it would be gone by morning. It wasn't. The cub was there when he emerged at dawn, and it immediately resumed its campaign against his boots. Rhett tried ignoring it, shooing it away, even spraying it with water from his canteen. Nothing deterred it for more than a few minutes. "Fine," he said finally, during a lunch break 3 days into their strange cohabitation. The cub had graduated from attacking his boots to stalking his sandwich. "You want to play? Let's play." He tore off a corner of his sandwich and tossed it. The cub pounced, devouring it in one gulp, then fixed all 6 eyes on him expectantly. Rhett laughed despite himself. He tossed another piece, farther this time. The cub shot after it like a missile, its movements liquid and precise even in play. They continued like this until Rhett's lunch was gone. Then, on impulse, he reached out slowly and wiggled his fingers near the cub's face. It immediately latched onto his glove with its teeth, growling and shaking its head. Rhett grinned. "Oh, that's how you want it?" He pulled his hand back, dragging the lightweight cub across the ground, then released. The cub tumbled, righted itself instantly, and launched back at him. This time, Rhett was ready. He grabbed the cub gently around its middle, surprised by how solid it felt, all muscle and bone beneath the soft fur, and brought it close to his face. The cub froze, 6 eyes wide. Then Rhett did something he couldn't quite explain, even to himself. He opened his mouth and gently closed his teeth on the cub's scruff, applying no pressure, just mimicking what he'd seen it do to his boots and gloves 100 times. The effect was instantaneous and profound. The cub went completely still. Its eyes, all 6 of them, locked onto his face with laser focus. When he released it and set it down, it didn't immediately pounce again. Instead, it circled him once, twice, 3 times, making a strange thrumming sound deep in its chest that Rhett felt more than heard. Then it pressed itself against his leg and rubbed its head along his shin. "What just happened?" Rhett murmured. The cub, he was starting to think of it as female, though he had no idea if that was accurate, looked up at him with what he could only describe as adoration. She chirped, a softer sound than her usual growls, and the thrumming intensified. From that moment, everything changed. The cub Mira, he started calling her, after his sister, who'd had the same relentless energy, became his constant companion. She followed him on surveys, napping in his equipment cart or climbing on his shoulders. She'd grown noticeably in just 2 weeks, now the size of a medium dog, her movements becoming more coordinated and powerful. But more than that, she'd become protective. When a dust storm rolled in and Rhett was caught away from the HAB unit, Mira positioned herself between him and the worst of the wind, her body surprisingly effective as a shield. When he slipped on loose scree and twisted his ankle, she stayed pressed against his side, the entire hobble back to safety, lending support despite her size. One morning, Rhett woke to find Mira wasn't alone. 3 adult predators sat in a semicircle outside his HAB unit. Each was massive, easily 2 meters long, not counting their tails with the same iridescent fur and multiple eyes. They could have torn through the reinforced walls if they'd wanted to. They simply watched. Rhett's heart hammered as he activated the external camera. Mira was sitting calmly among the adults, occasionally touching noses with the largest one. As Rhett watched, the big predator leaned down and bit gently at Mira's scruff, exactly as Rhett had done weeks before. Understanding crashed over him like cold water. The bite hadn't been random play. It had been a social signal, something deeply meaningful in predator society, and by mimicking it instinctively, Rhett had somehow marked himself as pack. Mira had told her family about him, and they'd accepted it. The adults left after an hour, melting back into the rocky terrain like shadows. When Rhett finally worked up the courage to leave the HAB unit, she greeted him with her usual enthusiasm, attacking his boots with renewed vigor. Rhett laughed and grabbed her in a gentle headlock, teeth grazing her fur in that now familiar gesture. Mira thrummed, that deep vibration of contentment, and he felt an answering warmth in his chest. He'd come to Kelvar 7 for solitude. Instead, he'd found something far more valuable: acceptance from a species that saw him not as human or alien, but simply as pack. And when Mira bit playfully at his boots, he bit back, knowing now what it truly meant.